What'd you say?
Thank you for that reminder.
I know, yeah. I think this is something Mildred was right. I thought it would be, it was sure interested me. This is an introduction into contemporary black artists by Mildred Thompson.
Get the microphone, please.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, this is introduction Mildred wrote to an article on contemporary black artists. Let's see if I can read it, if it'll make sense to you. It'd be better if she was reading it, but this is Mildred's voice. The creative soul growing up here, talking about the United States, is made to understand at a very early age that he is different, and that his interests are not recognized as vital and are not encouraged. By the time of specialized study, one is forced to choose commercial art, no freedom to create, but the lure of a steady paycheck, or fine art, freedom to create with warnings of destitution. No matter which choice is made, forever after the artist's doubts have made the right choice. No matter which choice is made, forever after the artist's doubts having made the right choice. The fine artist is so programmed that when his or her work actually sells, she or he becomes doubtful of the validity of the work. If there are no sales, then the artist is forced to question the validity of the self. The black artist, under the burden of all of this, has the additional burden of America's history of racism and discrimination, and may question the validity of making art in such a society. The black artist is often in galleries and museums included out. Buyers and collectors, black or white, are rare and difficult to contact. The black artist is forced into a double sense of poverty. The non-salaried artist is often seen as a peddler, beggar, and unemployable dreamer at best. Racism, indifference, and ignorance do not cause for art. We have not been trained to wish for art as we have been told to wish for foreign cars. The black artist here in these times is in a dilemma dictated to from all corners of the social and political arena. He may find acceptance neither here nor there. That's very forceful. And if she was here today, she would say that's as true now as whenever she wrote this 25 years ago. She was not wishy-washy. That was not in her vocabulary.
She was.
But I just thought that was very typical of her language. And I'm sure you've probably read that. But,
Wes, that writing really forces me to make a comment. I think you guys on the panel know that Mildred is my favorite artist of all time. And her skill is obviously amazing, but her journey is even more so. And to come from her background in Jacksonville, to not be encouraged at all, to grow up in the same environment with Janetta Cole, and to know her journey, and particularly in light of what you just read, the misgivings, the self-doubt that should have created. But apparently did not.
Yeah.
And so she went on her way. And you've spoken about how she wound up in Germany, which is amazing. But she got some affirmations, and I'd like to hear your reaction to some of this. She got some affirmations in terms of being featured. I think she was the youngest artist to be featured in the Cedric Dover book, which is a seminal book in African American art. She forced her way, as I understand it, into the permanent collection of either the Smithsonian or MoMA in the 1950s. So she was getting some affirmation. How critical, first of all, I'll stop there. How critical was that? You know, to those kinds of successes to her determination to forge ahead.
Well, I mean, I think from what research I've done, it was sort of in fits and starts, right? So she came back from having really incredible success in Germany post sort of in her grad studies and getting sales and galleries, and kind of came to New York in the early 60s, kind of riding that tide. And indeed, there was a curator at MoMA who was interested in experimental printmaking and bought 2 of Mildred's prints. She had studied at the Brooklyn Museum School, and I think, of course, had connections there, and they have a print and a drawing. But as she kept knocking on doors, the Whitney, the Guggenheim, you know, they were continuing to shut on her. And she writes, actually, if we had more time, she writes pretty heartbreakingly about some of her experiences in New York. And I think, you know, we sort of take for granted the successes of the civil rights movement as kind of that we know that there were successes, but in 1961, when you're in the Lower East Side and you're seeing people around you being shot, and just, I mean, she writes really in a heartbreaking way about what was going on in New York and how she viewed what was going on in the world from basically 60 to 64. And it was discouraging for her when she had so much success in Germany, and I think went back. And as I'm looking at her career, I often think about what would her life have been like had she stayed in New York and down on Lower East Side with someone like Jack Whitten, who's getting such incredible success now. Granted, it took him a long time as well, but he was in the mix, you know, he was alongside de Kooning at a bar, you know, and he tells these stories. And, you know, she didn't go to Paris like Ed Clark, right? She went to Germany, and a small town in Germany as well. So it's interesting how the fact that Mildred was such an individual and followed these leads and followed her heart and her passions and where kind of connections were made, it certainly wasn't the easy path. You know, I often think when she came back to the U.S., had she not settled in Atlanta, and I love Atlanta, you know, I spent a long time here, but had she moved into New York, I mean, you brought up Howardina Pindell earlier. Howardina Pindell was a curator at MoMA, and she, I mean, granted, she still doesn't have the recognition she deserves, but she was in the mix. So I feel like a lot of the accolades that Mildred got are even more impressive, thinking about the fact that she really wasn't in that mix, you know? I mean, it happened because there were some deep connections with folks who were looking out for her, or the work was serendipitously in a place that got some attention, but it was certainly fits and starts. I can't imagine how someone of her sort of brilliance and expertise, how that would affect you over decades. So I don't know if I answered your question.
No, you did, but you actually raised another thought, point. I hear Mildred saying.
This is Don Roman, by the way. He's the 6th Musketeer. He's been helping us a great deal on Mildred's estate as well, so I want to make sure everyone knows who we're talking to.
But I hear her saying that all of that was worth it for the art. That the art was the most important thing to her, and that's why she went to Germany rather than to Paris. where she knew, and she's a smart lady, she knew where the opportunities were for accolades. That's why she left New York. You mentioned, you know, the fact that there were opportunities to mix with the culinary mother role, et cetera. As I understand it, she had those opportunities, and they shunned her more for her gender rather than her race. Am I right there? So again, she in the brief time I had to really interact with her, she gave me she made the statement that for her it was about the work. And Donna has reinforced this for 13 years now. It was about the work. And if she had to make a personal sacrifice, and she made many, she was willing to make those. And the legacy that she was leaving, the body of work that she was leaving, was worth it to her. For all those likes and all the lack of recognition, the fact that she is not in the books, as so many are now. And yet, her work and her intellect, as shown downstairs and in those brief writings, tell me that she stands head and shoulders above anybody I know.
I'd like to add something to this. We've mentioned that she's in the collection of MoMA and how she got there. She was young, just coming back. She wanted to be in the States and she wanted to set up. She's in New York. And she called the museum and they wouldn't see her. They wouldn't see her. And she called and she told them, she began to make a nuisance of herself, but Mildred didn't care whether she was a nuisance. She called every day at the same time, and they would say, "Oh, this is Mildred Thompson," but no, I'm not interested. And she said to them, "I'm going to call. If it takes a year, I'm going to call them every day at the same time until I get an audience with someone to look at these prints." And after about 3 weeks, with Mildred, she didn't care what they thought. She knew that she had something good and the prints deserved to be seen by somebody who knew that they were good. And she was just going to force them to see it. And the man just gave up after a while, got sick of hearing about this, and called her in and was astounded and bought 3 prints. So, I mean, she just didn't give up. I mean, she had incredible self-confidence. She knew that she was good. She didn't need you to say, you know, someone came to her, this is another part of Mildred. Somebody came up to her and said, "Oh, Mildred, I really like your work." You know, she said, "Compared to what? What did you say?" You know, which is harsh and strong, but I mean, it was, you know, she knew who she was. She didn't need you to, you know, sorry. What you want? James? No? Go ahead. I mean, I'm finished with the story. I don't know if you.
I was wondering, toward the end of Mildred's life, did she ever give you some sense of, did she express what she wanted her legacy to be or how she wanted to be remembered? Did you have those discussions when she knew that she was going to transition at some point?
No, she didn't. There were some things that she was concerned about, that some art that she had left in Germany, and she told me to follow up and see if I could bring it home. But the thing that impressed me at the end of her life was her incredible courage. When she found out that she was terminal, they had given her like 6 months to live, and I said to her, "Mildred, what do we do?" And she said, "What do you mean, what do we do? We continue to live our lives as we always have." And that 6 months turned into 3 years.
Wow.
So that, you know,
But she produced all that time.
and during